Hey everyone, welcome to the Coast to Coast NHL podcast with my main man, Mr. Maverick, episode number 15. My favorite number, so I decided to whip out the Crosby Penguins jersey as a tribute to my favorite team and my favorite current Penguin. So there's that. We're here. We're on week 3 or 4 of no games being played. I can't even remember now when the last game was played.
Don't think it matters. And March 11th, actually, you know what? I should remember, and I will remember now I say that because it's my mom's birthday. So I'll always remember the last day that they had anything because that was the night. That night was the night the NBA thing happened.
Okay, so March 11th was that's like almost 20 days ago now. So we're 3 weeks, but we'll call it 3 weeks because it was right after the podcast. I guess this is our third one.
Yeah, it literally was because remember you texted me afterwards and you said, or you texted me recently and you said, oh well, that was a bad call because literally at the end of the thing I said we'll see what happens next week or whatever, and that
Yeah.
was the night that everything stopped.
Yeah, pretty crazy. But we're here. We survived another week, so that's good. Good to see you again.
Yeah,
And
man.
I don't personally have any crazy topics to have. There's been a lot of random stuff going around on the NHL world.
Yeah,
Player polls, stuff like that. But
yeah,
it's been hard for me personally to stay in touch without games being played, without
yeah.
real things that no one knows what's going to happen. So it's hard when you don't know how to prepare for something. It's kind of hard to
Well, I
have a
mean,
take or anything like that.
not to get too personal or anything, but
Yep.
I believe you mentioned that your partner had lost their source of income as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So me too. So I mean, that's hitting as well. So I mean, just to be real for a second, like that comes way more important than sports.
Yep.
So because I'm kind of working and my partner's not, I mean, it's just kind of changing the game in terms of what's really important. And
Most
same
certainly.
thing without sports on and whatever, and with different dynamics, really different priorities being put into place. It's really kind of, it's just really different, and it's
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. And everyone is having their different ways of dealing with it, and so it's almost as a reminder that it is a reminder that there are more important things than sports, and it kind of makes you
Exactly.
realize that it's the loved ones, it's the close family,
And
and
it's more a distraction than anything. I mean, we do need that distraction, but it's not an important distraction. It's not
mhm.
something that makes the world go around. But anyways, I just wanted to mention
on
that because I mean, I've noticed a difference myself. So I think everyone's starting to kind of realize that. And the thing that I find funny and I've been thinking about is like, let's say we fast forward. I don't know how long this is going to be, but until this is over, everyone's going to be a lot more thankful about going to work each day, and
yeah.
fighting for being in traffic on the highway. People aren't going to be freaking out and being in a rush and giving people the finger, I think, as much. People are going to be like, what's an extra 30 seconds? I'm not stuck in my house, I'm driving to work. You know what I mean? it's
Yeah,
it's going to be different.
yeah. I personally am. I don't know. I have this hair thing going on. I know you can't see it, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
for me, I'm on the fence. Do I just let it grow crazy, just see how long it gets before I have to go back to the office and see people, or I'm also contemplating shaving it. So I'm looking at both complete ends of the spectrum at this point.
Yeah. I'm just going. You will be able to see each week the
The
progression of
prog-
this mane.
the
I am
progression of
not
living
touching
inside.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not touching this for, I'm assuming, probably about 2 months. So I mean, it's when I actually pull it out, it's
It's
pretty
getting there. Yeah.
long. It's,
Love
it's
it. Love
probably
it.
about 5, almost 6 inches long because it's also scrunched up. So if
Hmm.
I pull out a hair, it would probably be about that
Yeah, I
long.
hear you.
It's ridiculous. By the time this is all done, I'll be able to spread it on the sides and then braid it down. And I told my mom I'm gonna do that, and she's like, I won't know who you are. I'm gonna pretend I don't know you. I'm like, oh damn.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, I did have a couple things written
Yeah.
down. I know I messaged you early about something I was excited about.
Yeah.
So I mean, we can get to that at the end. That's what I figured that we'd kind of wrap up with. I don't have much to talk on when it comes to fantasy. I don't think we really need to do an episode this week. The only real
No, for sure.
update is that next Sunday is the Lotto draft.
This Sunday, right?
This Sunday, sorry, yeah, the
Yeah.
5th. So we'll be recording that and posting that up probably. Maybe we'll post that on the Wednesday, maybe during the day or midday Wednesday. and then we can kind of do our podcast after that with our reactions and whatnot. And
Yeah,
then we can kind of
there's
bang
also
them
a
out
potential
one after
if I
another.
am live streaming it, then it might automatically just post if we go that route too.
Oh, okay, cool. And then if that's the case, then we'll just do like a recap on Wednesday or whatever.
Yeah,
That was really my only thing to mention on fantasy. So figured I'd get that out of the way, and we don't really need to do that segment.
sounds great.
But yeah, the realistically, there's no real stuff to talk about in terms of the coronavirus. Like, there's no real update. I mean, Toronto's banned some public, more outdoor gatherings until June 1st.
I would
So I
say
mean,
the
I think it's a
biggest
bit of an update.
update when it comes to sports and that is that there. I don't know how strong this is because it is coming out of China, but they are looking to start sports again there.
Yeah.
In the
But
coming
we also have to
weeks.
remember that they're like 4 to 6 weeks ahead of us, right?
Allegedly, yes.
Allegedly. So, I mean, if we're assuming under that assumption, maybe that means in 4 to 6 weeks we can have fans. But my belief is that, yes, we might have fans, might have sports. But my belief is that when we have those sports, at least for the first little bit, it won't have fans. Like
Agreed. Yeah,
we
totally.
might have sports in 6 weeks, but we could have a full season without fans because it just is lingering and whatnot.
Exactly. Yep, for
We
sure.
don't
For
know.
sure. I think that's the most realistic reality at this point is
Yeah.
sports come back
And
without fans
smart.
before sports
Mhm.
with fans come back. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the NHL's asked for availability through August 30th. I just kind of did a bit of backwards thinking. You need
Hmm.
about 50 days to get through the playoffs, like minimum, if we're talking like maybe a best of 3 or best of 5 in the first round and then a couple best of 7s. Like, you need at least about 50 days, right? With a couple days off and whatnot. So if you go backwards from like kind of mid-September, because they need about 4 weeks off minimum in between the layoff. So the latest they could start and have a somewhat regular season next season is start of November,
Yeah.
which you'd need about October off, right? So working backwards at September, August. So you'd have to start your playoffs by like August 1st. So if that's the case, you need to start planning everything at the latest by mid-July, at the absolute latest, but probably at the end of the first week of July. So if there's not some sort of major update by mid-June, even June 1st, I'm thinking June 1st, we're going to know if there's an end of a season. That's kind of the date in my mind, where
Makes the most sense to me
it'll
too.
provide a lot of clarity,
Yeah.
where we can actually start talking about, the next, what we do next. Because the NHL said that they're still going to do the draft.
They're still
MLB
going to
changed
do the
their
draft
draft.
on time?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So
Yep.
are they
They said they're just
when
going to
is the
do,
draft typically?
they're going to do
What month?
June.
It's
June.
normally in June.
Yeah, they say it
So
doesn't affect anything. They'll just do points percentage for the regular season because they're likely not doing a regular season anymore anyway.
yeah,
Right? It'll probably be points
realistically.
percentage. So they'll probably just do that for points percentage for drafting. So
Okay. Okay.
yeah, that's under the assumption that everything's going to come back, obviously, right? But
Yeah, and we really don't know yet because we're not even at
we
the
know
peak,
nothing.
right? So
Yeah, exactly. I do feel more comfortable this week than I did last week, though. To be honest, I felt more like not what am I trying to say, unease last week.
about what though specifically?
Just about. I don't even know. I don't know why I'm saying that. I just
No,
last week when we were recording, I just felt a little bit more anxious and whatnot.
uh-huh.
This week, I am feeling a little bit more relaxed about.
Yeah, I've had the
Stuff.
similar trajectory. Not necessarily last week, but I think 2 weeks ago I had when I was still going to the office for work, I was fairly anxious about the whole situation because you kind of saw what was taking place in Europe, and you knew it was coming here eventually, like just the way. So
Mhm.
there's some. I guess there's more. It's more of okay, we're here now. Like everyone's kind of in the same spot now. We like and I don't know. I feel more. I'm with you. Like
Yeah.
there's less uncertainty. Of course, there's still tons of uncertainty, but there's
Mhm.
less.
Maybe it's just that we're more comfortable
Acclim-
being in this new
acclimatized.
routine.
Yeah, we've become
What?
acclimatized to the situation a little bit more
Yeah,
as well.
maybe
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah, and I mean, I think generally speaking, we're of the grouping that is following the requirements and requests, and we're isolating and doing our due diligence. So I mean,
Yep.
I think that we're also more at ease because we're doing our own responsibilities. I mean, we
Yeah,
can't
we're
make
doing what we
anybody do
can.
anything, right?
Yeah,
But we're trying to do our part. So
great, totally.
yeah. But yeah, so I mean, that was really my only take NHL wise. Had a general question for your take. We could
Yeah.
probably argue this for honestly days. I don't really want to get into it that much, but I wanted your take. In the past, who is your preference? Who do you think is better? What's your take on Sakic versus Iserman?
Um, my
If
take
you
is
have one,
biased a little bit. I would lean Sakic, but deep down in my heart, I should lean Yzerman. Logically thinking, I would lean Yzerman. Yeah,
hmm
yeah, Yzerman, and
why?
but
In
because
just a couple points.
um, well, they're both
I mean, you
Canadian,
can't be
so
wrong. I'm just curious
I
what.
would just say the he. I don't know why I would lean it, to be honest.
Just preference?
I just I don't have numbers or anything in my head. He seems like he was relevant for longer.
Hmm
Just trying to look back at my head. Detroit seemed like more of the powerhouse than Colorado ever was. Like Colorado was strong, but Detroit seemed like they were stronger. They kind of
hmm
had that head to head against each other. And if I
They
had to
did.
pick a
Yep.
winner in that head to head, I would say Detroit came out on top between the two of them.
It's
This is
fun.
all looking back on. This was decades ago now, so
Yep.
it's hard. It's just off memory.
And it's
If
our era, right? It's the era we
mhm.
grew up watching when as kids, anyways.
I was an Avs fan growing up, WA and all that. I think we
Yeah.
talked about this last podcast. How when they
Yeah.
first switched over, I was kind of rooting for them. I had NHL '96. Sakic was on the cover.
My
Um,
buddy was a goalie and he was obsessed with Waugh and I liked him too, but like because he was a goalie, I kind of conceded that like that's your favorite player.
hmm,
But like I kind of was then like, okay, well, I got kind of looked at other teams. So like I respected and I enjoyed Colorado, but I didn't like love them per se.
hmm.
They're hella good, but that's kind of why I would pick Yzerman too. Like Sakic to me, Sakic seemed like the better goal scorer, at least after Yzerman turned into more of a well-rounded player. Maybe
Yeah,
Yzerman was a
I feel
better
like
pure scorer. I
Eiserman
don't
might
know,
have had
but
more of an impact as well on the Olympics and global stage a little
true,
bit more than
true.
Sakic. So that's kind of also what put me into that.
The reason why I asked that too, and why I kind of prodded a little bit, is I have the numbers up ahead of me or in front of me.
I'm glad
Um,
someone came
I,
prepared with something to talk
Yeah,
about. Thank you.
I have this and then the other stuff prepared. So Eisman played. I'll go through kind of just. I'll jump around a little bit, but I'll try to keep it kind of straightforward and simple.
Cool.
So Sakic played 20 seasons. Eiserman played 22. So Eiserman played in 2 extra seasons,
Yep.
which equated to about an extra 120 games, including playoffs and stuff. So an extra 120 games, let's say. Eiserman scored an extra 70 goals. I'm just doing rough math, by the way.
Yeah, that's
He
fine.
scored an extra 70 goals over those 2 seasons. He scored an extra 50 assists for overall an extra 110 points in those 2 seasons. So if you take that down, that's 55 points per season. Do you think Sakic could have got 2 more seasons at 55 points?
Yeah, very possible. Yeah.
I'd say very possible. Right? I don't know. Did
You
he
don't
retire
know.
at the
Yeah.
lockout? Was that what kicked him out? I don't
I
remember.
don't remember honestly. Like
I want to say the lockout killed him, killed his
we
career.
had
But
I've said it a bunch on the pod. I have this like 5 year gap where I fell off hockey because of that lockout. So I kind of
hmm
uh, I actually owe it to Rocket Tree's manager that got me back into hockey again. And just
hmm
it all it took was me watching one game really and having money on it to be like, oh shit, this sport's actually quick, fast paced again. I forgot about this. Love it
hmm
again. Here we
Yeah,
are.
I when I pulled that up, I in my head, I didn't put too much thought into it, but as I looked at some of the numbers, I was like, wow, like it's pretty close. And like I'm not gonna lie, I kind of there's been a couple places and like another places where I got this original thought from, but where I want to take it to after that original part of the conversation, is it now fair to say Matthews is the new Sakic, as to McKinnon is the new Iserman?
I don't know. I don't know if you can say it's fair to say that. No, it's
No,
too
you don't think
early.
so? Yeah.
It's too early.
Could it be? Let me say, could that be
Like the
trajectory that they're potentially
it
on?
could be one thing that those two had in the past that these guys, Matthews and McKinnon, will have is they're not in the same conference or they'll be
Hmm.
playing each other more often. It's developing that. Like Colorado and the Leafs aren't going to develop a rivalry the way
Hmm.
Detroit and Colorado did in the
And
past.
like, I more meant like contributions overall, and like it's hard to say because when you brought up the Canadian team, it's Canada versus Canada US and all that
Mhm.
other stuff too is hard. But I was just thinking like game styles and whatever. Like to me, if you're comparing Sakic to Yzerman's the better overall player. Sakic's the better pure goal scorer probably.
Mhm.
So when I'm looking at McKinnon and Matthews probably better goal scorer than McKinnon, but McKinnon's probably better in every, if not all, other categories.
Yeah, it could be argued. Who knows?
But
Like Matthews is so young, we have no idea what that could develop into.
yeah, exactly. And the thing with Matthews too that people have to remember, and what I always remind myself is like you could have essentially created him, dropped him in the draft year, and been like, here's this great player we think. Because nobody fucking knows. Because he blazed a path that nobody else has gone through. He basically was so good at goal scoring and so good at scoring goals, like I brought up a few times, that like
Yeah.
that's all he ever did. That's all of the position he was ever put in. So like he only ever had to start learning defense a couple years ago. And because he's so
Seriously,
smart,
yeah.
he's getting better at it.
Oh
He's
yeah, and
not
that's
great
the
at
thing.
face-offs and stuff, but like with his hand-eye and everything, which is I think one of the best in the game, with his big body and strong upper body and whatnot, and strong core and everything, lower body, everything as well. I think in a couple of years, once he adds, more practice on face-offs and all these other things, like there's nothing stopping him being a top five center in the game,
And that
in my
but
opinion.
I agree with that opinion, and that is, I think I showed you on here my how I bought the Austin Matthews rookie card, right? My
Hmm.
plan is to invest about $1,000 long term, like over the next year, into more of them. I want to get about 10 of them,
Okay.
because I feel like as long as he doesn't get like some crazy career ending injury, he will very likely be the best Leaf of all time.
Ever. You're probably right.
And
If you
Leaf
could somehow get
players,
that signed,
yeah, and when Leaf players, they just bring more money to in general. So I just
yeah,
think the trajectory
that's
of
a good
this
idea,
rookie
yo.
card is in 20 years this rookie card could be worth triple, quadruple what I paid for it.
Yo,
So
that's sick. That's a sick
that's
idea.
kind of why I'm going pretty heavy on Matthew specifically,
Maybe
because
you
I
should chop
do.
this part out of the podcast, yo. Just saying.
Man, if someone's listening to this podcast and gets a tip from me, I'm all for it. Like, do it up. They're not gonna. There's enough out there that we can both get into the market on this.
Yeah,
Like,
I know
a
that's true.
thousand dollars is really only gonna buy me five. Like, let's
It
be
just might
honest.
change the availability factor that you can get.
Not worried about that. But that's kind of my. I am a firm believer in Matthews, um, and that's how I'm backing up my belief in him is, and that's kind of why I've gotten hooked on hockey cards recently. Is that
Yeah.
you can kind of back the players that you love, and if they turn out to be good, then you
You
can
should
kind of.
ask me on some guys that I should like, or who you should find, or like if you come across like oddballs, you should ask me because you might be able to get on top of certain ones like
Mhm.
randomly,
Yeah,
well before they're like way popular and
yeah. I
whatever.
have about. I would say there's three that I'm looking to collect quite a few of right now. The
Hmm.
goalie, I don't know if you'll agree with this, is Cal Peterson. Um, um, his cards are really cheap though. Like I'm getting his
Yeah.
card for like $2.
Yeah.
So that's kind of hope goalies don't tend to go for as much in that world either.
Yeah.
I'm buying up Cody Glass
Okay.
because he mo- even if he's not doesn't turn out to be the best player, he's the first ever player drafted by the Golden Knights. So
Yeah.
I think there might be some value in that
Yeah, there'll be long-term historical values. The value
for
will
the
be
person
after they
that.
win the first cup,
Yeah,
right? If
or
he's on the
someone,
team or
or
anything
there's
like
some
that.
guy out there that comes along and loves the Golden Knights. He's like, oh fuck, I can never
Yeah.
find this Cody Glass. Like that's like these are like long. like when it
Or
comes to
even
investing and stuff.
historians at some point, they'll be like, "Hey, this was like the first ever, like you said, first ever draft pick of this franchise, and now it's like the 10-year anniversary, and he's the guy, right?"
And he's a rare, and he could be a potentially rare card to have some
Yeah.
that are like the highest graded version. So that's kind of I don't know. That's my take on the three people I'm kind of going with. I was going for short term on Connor Hellebuck but with this season going, it's kind of ruined. So
Hmm.
I really thought
Fair
he had a
enough.
shot at winning the Vezina this year. So
Yeah. Yeah, I thought so too, but I guess we'll see what happens, right?
seriously, yeah.
All right, let's get to this thing I was excited about
Okay.
because lately I've been listening. I kind of tuned out of sports radio because I felt like, what's the point listening to it right now? Because all they're really doing is rehashing and like talking about other stuff or talking the death out of everything. So like I'm kind of
Yeah.
not into it right
I
now.
also
But
am not on the road on the radio listening to
that's true
as
too.
either.
And like I'll make the accommodations for Steve Dangle stuff and
Yeah.
for Overdrive and Leafs Lunch sometimes if I'm in the mood. But anyways, the last couple of days I tuned in and it was pissing me off because with the talk about, oh, if there's a lockout or not a lockout, sorry, whatever, but like if the season ends and whatnot, and with the issues with the cap, is there going to be compliance buyouts and maybe two of them? So everybody in Toronto is like, well, we have to buy out one of the big three, and it's Tavares. We have to buy out Tavares. We have to buy out Tavares, not because we want to, but we just have to buy out Tavares
So
because
this is the media presence saying you have to buy one of the
this
ones.
is everyone that's talking on the radio. We have to buy out Tavares because there's no one else really that like the thing. So let me start a little bit over. So there's no one else that has a bad contract. There's no obvious buyout contract on the Leafs, right? Unless you're buying out one of the big three or something like that because you have to. Wouldn't it make more sense for another team to acquire Tavares and buy out their bad contract just as
Yeah,
an off
it would.
point?
100%.
But beyond that, if the like, why would you ever buy out like Tavares? Like, how many Tavares level players are in the NHL?
There's not like under
25?
20, 25. Yeah, that's a good number. Yeah.
How many? I have a different solution, and my solution, and other people probably won't like it because you're moving quantity over quality, is you move Kapanen, Kerfoot, and Andreas Johnson, all three of them. Now, how many of those level players are in the NHL?
Quite a few.
200. That's a big number. Maybe 150, 100 even.
Yeah.
Their level or higher, I should say.
No, I got what you were saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, the chances of you being able to fill those three holes at a lower cap hit, like so, be combined, they're at just around 12 mil for the next two to 3 years.
Okay.
So those three players for 12 mil, you're not telling me that you can't drop that down half to 6 mil and spend 6 mil on three solid players when you already have two entry level players ready to fill those three spots. So really, you have $4 million to spend on filling those three spots, and you turn Mikheyev, Engvall, and whoever this $4 million player is to replace those three. That's like, I don't understand why that's not being talked about, and everyone's just like, nope, got about Tavares.
Because I don't know, it very likely could be the fact that just saying let's sell Tavares sells more than let's sell the third liners.
Yeah.
It could be very much that. Dubas would never do it. He would.
Oh, he never would. Yeah.
No chance, because first of all, it's admitting that he made bad signings himself, and he's not going to admit that because realistically, I don't think they're that bad of signings.
Nope.
This is his core. This is a core that has potential to be dominant for years. So there's no chance in hell.
The one thing that I recognize when we set up our team structure this way is that our top 4, maybe 5 forwards will be our guys, and everyone else is going to rotate every 2 to 3 years. We're going to have new bodies in all those other positions
sounds like
every other year.
Sounds like a championship team that I know about.
Right?
Penguins.
Exactly. So, like, people need to get out of their head that, oh, we're going to build this team and we're going to get these, 10 forwards we love. No, you either build with depth and you get your top 9 and you kind of tinker here and there,
It's a
or you
little.
get your studs, your horses, you run them, and then you just try to complement them where you can.
It is a little strange that they don't get the comparison to being built like the Penguins that
Mm-hmm.
very often. But I guess the Penguins did. They spent their money on their winger Kessel back then.
Mm-hmm.
Like they.
Well, it's more of a comparison, I would say, to back when they had Stahl. Like when the Leafs last year had Kadri, Tavares, and Matthews.
Mhm.
I compare that to when they had Crosby, Malkin, and Stahl
I love Stahl on the
in
Penguins.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it
And
was
then
great.
when they had, who am I forgetting? There was Gary Roberts, and who was their other big winger at that time?
The
When they had
Penguins.
Roberts and Gonchar, they had a big winger. Who did they have? Or was that just when Hornquist was big?
Possibly.
I think it might have just been when Hornquist was big. But yeah, so they had like their money. Oh, James Neal.
Oh
That's
yeah,
who they
yeah,
had.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, James Neal. I was like, they had somebody, and they
Yeah.
had who did they trade for Neal? They traded somebody for Neal.
I forget.
Um,
So I don't think I was.
yeah.
That was kind of when I was in. I was tuned
Okay,
out.
yeah, they traded. I can't remember who they traded James Neal for, but they traded him to Dallas for something. But anyways, my point was that you take James Neal, Crosby, Malkin, and whoever Hornquist, let's say at the time, or probably was Dupuis, at the time. That or Reki or whoever, I guess you could fill in any of those names. They were all cycles, but it was their 5 main forwards, and every 2 or 3 years they had a
And they
change
still
of new
do
guys.
it. They still
And
do
the
it.
other thing that people forget about is that there's going to be guys who get bought out, who need second chances, who need to prove themselves after some sort of weird situation, whatever, that look to go to these teams who are stacked offensively and turn themselves into a 1-year project and rebound from that.
Or just to win.
Yeah, or to win, exactly. Excuse me. And in the NHL, how many teams fit that mold?
Not a lot.
Probably 6. Like in terms of teams going for it, that have the players already, that have the spots for those players, that it can attract for winning and also will take a discount to go to. You're probably looking at Washington, Pittsburgh, maybe Toronto, like in the East anyways. So you're probably looking at maybe 10 teams. So
No, I'm totally with you. It's funny because I've never been like a hardcore Leafs fan, never, and just watching as an outsider, unbiased person, I can never understand why the fans are upset with their team right now. This is a team that has a most great potential. If in 3 years they do shit all with the potential, then that's a different story.
Mm-hmm.
But hockey's such a high variance sport that 1 year you're gonna have a bad year sometimes. Pittsburgh got swept last year, first round. They're still a fucking great team.
But somebody's going to have a bad year, an injury year, and they're going to lose their spot. Best example for me on the Leafs is Andreas Johnsson. Andreas Johnsson got paid $3.4 million this year, and he barely played. And when he played, he wasn't very good because he wasn't in the groove because he was hurt and whatever, and he just didn't have a good year. I don't blame him. It's no one's fault. It's just, I'm sure he'd admit it. It wasn't a great season. But my point is that's $3.4 million you could have theoretically spent on a different player. So the Leafs could theoretically move on from him as they currently have and spend that money somewhere else to get better where they need it. And they proved that they were almost a playoff team without his presence at all.
That's a good point.
So, I mean, to move him, is it really a penalty? But the reason why I kind of prefaced all this is what I wanted to get at. My solution to the problem, especially if there's 2 buyouts. This practice is especially valuable if there's 2 buyouts, but let's assume that there's 1 or 2. It doesn't really matter for it, but let's just assume that. So, I went through the NHL and I looked at all the teams who are basically strapped for cash, who have assets, who could play along with this theory if we had to play this game, and fit these examples because I didn't want to just throw out random stuff. And
I love how you did some research into this. This is great.
Yeah, I did quite a lot of research, actually. I spent a while on this one. So basically, if I'm Toronto, I take one of these good players in Kapanen, Kerfoot, Johnsson, or maybe a defenseman in Justin Hall, but I'll ignore Hall for this purpose. I will bring him up later, but he's more of a guy that I only include him because he's not a forward. He's a defenseman.
Okay.
So some of these trades are for defensemen. So I wanted to bring a defender's name into the equation. So that's really why his name's there. But looking on the Leafs defense, there's nobody you'd buy out.
Yeah.
And there's nobody really who's under contract other than Riley and Muzzin, who you just signed. So you're likely not trading those two guys, right? So if you're trading somebody to clear money, you're trading entry-level guys like Dermott and whatever. So you're really not doing it for the money. So I've taken that all out of the equation. So I've stumbled and defaulted to Justin Hall. But anyways, so now what I've done is I've gone around to teams and I've looked at teams who maybe are given an opportunity to buy somebody out, who can take advantage of getting rid of somebody's contract, but maybe can't pay for themselves. So I'll go through a couple examples to show what I'm trying to say. So for example, Detroit. Let's say Detroit can't and doesn't want to pay for Abdicator anymore, and let's say they want to buy him out. He's got $4.25 million over 3 more years. It's probably a bit heavy of a contract for him, correct?
Yeah, probably a little bit.
So let's say Toronto trades Kerfoot to Detroit for Abdicator
And then buys them out.
buys him out. Detroit is now upgraded from Abdicator to Kerfoot and got rid of their cap problem. Keeping in mind the Leafs paid a first rounder to get rid of $5.25 million of cap, but only $4.25 of actual money for Marlowe for Carolina. That's the closest thing we can use as a base comparison, correct?
Yeah, I just want to say, though, I just want to add this in here. This is all, at this point, pure speculation that this is even going to be an option.
Yes, it's pure speculation.
Okay.
But I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
I wanted to just do this whole practice under the assumption.
Yeah,
this
it's
is what
been
we're
it's been
dealing
something
with.
that's been tossed around that it might come due to the salary cap issues, due to the virus, blah 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 blah.
Yeah, exactly. And why I mentioned off the top with the Tavares is that's all the Leafs fans are talking about and seem to be able to think of and create. Well, this is my solution so that we can stop talking about that and actually seem a little smarter, because it's driving me nuts, because it's just like, don't just look at the first most obvious option. There's always other options. They may not be the best option or might not be the option you end up taking, but you don't always just look at the first option and go with it. It's just not the way life works, or at least it shouldn't be, right? So if we get to Abdicator and you're going from Kerfoot to Abdicator, you're saving $2.25 million over the 3 years of term. How much is that worth in terms of assets? Because you're going to be buying that cap, right?
Yep.
So how much would Detroit have to pay Toronto to buy it out?
Something. Not nothing.
Probably,
Pick.
Yeah, a couple picks maybe, a decent prospect and a fourth rounder maybe.
Yeah,
Something
because
small.
the way you're saying it is that there's more that, like, you're doing this one example, but there's potential that there's more of a market too, so they're going to be bidding against each other, blah 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 blah.
Exactly. And like Detroit wasn't the best example that I had, but I kind of have better ones going forward, and I'm saving one to the end that I think is going to blow some minds, but I'm excited to get there. So the second one would be Anaheim. So I think we're safe to say Ryan Kessler's probably done.
It seems like it, yes.
He had to relearn how to walk this past year, so I don't.
Yeah, just based off some of the stuff that happened with the Canucks this past, like around the Sedins and all that, the Sedin week, he kind of gave speeches. We kind of like loved him back into the place. It seems like he's done, yes.
Yeah, and like he was never really the quickest skater, right? Either. So I mean, to come back from an injury like that, I don't think he'll ever have the foot speed to, play in the AHL or anything, right? Yeah, like I think it's just, unfortunately, it is what it is. So if we look at Kessler, he's got 6.875 for 2 more years. Now, I mean, that's not a big deal. You can put that on IR, right? But for Anaheim, if they had the opportunity to rid themselves of 6.875, you think they'd do it probably, right? So let's say Toronto trades them Andreas Johnsson. They get back Kessler. So essentially Toronto buys out Kessler and they get Johnsson. So they turn this dead cap into a playing body.
Yeah.
And they save themselves almost $4 million for 2 years. How much is that worth? That's almost worth
more.
Almost twice as much as what the Leafs paid in theory to get rid of Marlowe, right? So a late first. So in that trade, you're probably talking a first and a prospect, right?
Yeah, if Anaheim's willing to trade a first because they are potentially terrible, it might be conditional first.
And maybe it's not a first, maybe it's a high second,
Yeah.
and a third, or maybe it's a second of, maybe it's 2/3 and a prospect. What I mean, the point
Conditions,
isn't
yeah.
to get the
Yeah.
exact value, but it's to show and illustrate the ballpark.
Yeah.
So I mean, if we go back to the root problem of how do the Leafs clear money doing this? Well, the Leafs trade Janssen and bring back Kessler, buy Kessler out. They just cleared themselves $3 million. And then they added that first or the early second and a prospect. Even if you don't keep those and you turn around and trade your own fourth with that second and one of your own prospects, now you can maybe get yourself like a Puljujarvi or maybe somebody else's cheap player or failed prospect or something like that.
Okay.
Bam, you've solved a problem and you've cleared $3 to $4 million. Is that not a viable option, or am I crazy?
Seems like it's viable because then even Anaheim does this, then if with your theory, we'll just say that there's 2 buyouts, they trade that one away, and then they still have 2 buyouts. The only issues I find, I
well,
think,
no, you can't trade buyouts. So like, if the Leafs did that once, then they only have one other buyout, so they could only do that twice.
no, but Anaheim would have 2 buyouts still.
Yeah, they could use their own buyout. Yeah.
Yeah, so in theory, Anaheim's getting a player and potential to buy out 3 players per se.
Yep. Exactly. Yes, they're buying that buyout slot. Yeah.
So it could be that kind of thing could be costly if there's a team that's desperate to need 3 or 4 buyouts. Cough, cough, Vancouver Canucks.
Let me step out here for a second. How many teams out there could afford to pay a big contract off like that and just move on with all things considered and their current setup? Probably 6 teams.
It's not a whole
18?
lot because I know there's a lot of teams out there that are struggling, and this whole thing might. Who knows what this is going to do?
They might have to clear $5 million off their books just to be able to salvage the next year or two.
Yeah, to make money
and
for
that's
their
before
owners.
anything else, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, this equation I'm talking about, I've only used examples of players that clearly kind of are the obvious first people who need to be moved, but there also might be secondary players or other players. Like, I don't know, maybe in a case there's somebody like Anaheim for that past example who maybe their second line winger, I don't know, I'll just throw out Silfverberg for a random example. Maybe they're like, oh, we can afford to pay off, I think it's perhaps like 2 or 3 for a couple of years and move that off too, just because, the Leafs will deal with Kessler's deal, and then now we can still afford to pay off 6 to try and get our own internal cap number. You know what I mean? Like, it allows further flexibility for other teams. So it's really only the teams that can afford to do these things that are going to capitalize. I'm praying that there's 2 buyouts because that means the Leafs can manipulate it twice.
My only concern with the buyouts is that how the NHLPA will deal with that.
Doesn't matter.
You don't think
if they say you have to get under a certain number, it doesn't matter what the PA says.
Okay, I just don't know if like players are going to be like, fuck.
But who's the losing player? Because if that player loses their spot, a prospect steps up. So there's nobody losing their spot.
Fair enough. The same amount of player. I guess they represent everybody, right? Okay.
Exactly.
That's
and everyone fairly in theory, right? Crosby isn't in theory more important than, I don't know, Kerfoot. They're all players of the NHL, right?
Yeah, fair enough. That's a good point.
So we'll see. Maybe that's not true in actuality, but
it probably isn't. It probably isn't. But that's fine.
I'm sure
we like to think that the world operates in fair terms. All right.
There's probably some sort of code. Now I got another one of these examples a little closer to home. So I got Vancouver in here.
Let's see if he did his research on who's the most obvious buyout.
I don't know what is the money situation. I hear that they say they have money, but would they actually make that step and buy out Eriksson? Would they do that?
I assume they would, yes.
And do you think that would hurt them moving forward, or do you think they could just buy him out and move forward and pretend it didn't happen? Will they lose another good player next year? Will they not be able to spend next year because they buy him out, or can they buy him out?
No, they can go up against the cap here.
Okay, yeah. Never mind. Then this example isn't the best one. I wasn't sure. I wanted to ask that off the top. But just for an example anyways, let's say the Leafs traded them Kerfoot, and then they bought out Eriksson. So now you're turning Eriksson into Kerfoot, and then the buyout's not your problem.
Yeah. like I don't have any evidence to support that I'm saying that they can spend to the cap, but like they've spent
Yeah,
to the cap. They're one of the more profitable.
you have a
Well,
better read on it than I do. That's why I wanted to
yeah,
ask
I
you.
just the owners are they're sticklers, but the only thing I could see is that the owners they're kind of sticklers, and then be like tell Jim Benning, yo, he's your problem. You can't just buy him out. If you buy him out, it's your money wasted. Like we've talked
Yeah,
about that kind of scenario before. I think a podcast or two ago, where someone's just like, yeah, you fucked up, you bought him out, but I'm taking that money away from you anyway.
yeah,
It could happen because of the ownership is they can be like that.
yeah. So I mean, I don't know what that would be worth or anything, but if you save, that 2 million over 2 years, that's worth something. But
Yep.
for me, I'm gonna go ahead and call this. I think I even said it before. I'm gonna pre-call one of the losers of this offseason, um, down a couple years is Vancouver because they've been flaunting about how they have what 7 pieces outside the NHL that they love and shit like that.
Yeah.
The
Yep.
thing that I find people forget and lose focus or concentration on is when you have 2 or 3 really nice assets, you hold them tight and you don't want to move them, right? If you've got 7 or 8 assets, you have to rank them in some capacity. Somebody's going to fall down the pecking order. Somebody's going to fall out of favor, right?
Yep.
So if somebody falls out of favor and they should be 3 or 4, but they drop down to 7 or 8, and they're like, you know what? I don't value that guy. I guess I can lose that guy. Now that value's biased, right? So a team could come in. Let's use this example. Let's say the Leafs come in and like, oh yeah, your number 6 guy that you're not so in love with, but you kind of like. Internally, they might value him as like their number 2 guy, right? But they
Yeah.
might be, it's your 7 guy, whatever. All of a sudden, you acquire him in this type of deal.
Yeah, you
You
can't.
turn around and
You
he's number
typically can't
whatever.
get as much for him
Hmm.
because he's so far down your. Because you can't get value from him, so why should someone else pay the value for him? That I hear you.
Exactly.
That's totally.
Yeah. So I mean, that's something that they're gonna have to do a couple moves, and I think
Mhm.
that they need to be careful with that.
Well, I was very
Um,
interested to see how Vancouver was until this situation happened, this possible buyout, and all this stuff happened. If the season would have went as normal, I was interested to see how Vancouver was going to handle the cap situation because they're
mhm.
right up against the cap, and Markstrom was coming off, and there's a lot of talk here that we won't be able to keep him. But if
Yeah.
there is a buyout situation, that's going to
Opens
really
the
help
door.
Vancouver a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's easy solution for Vancouver. If there's a buyout, if they can afford it, that's the easiest solution. If they can't, then something like that would be a value, right?
Mhm.
So I mean, that's Vancouver. And then I have another one for San Jose. So I mean, San Jose's got Mark-Edward Vlasic,
Yeah.
right? He's got seven mil over 7 more years.
He has that many more years?
Yeah,
Sheesh.
yeah. So like that's a lot of money, right? So this is an example where I mentioned earlier about Justin Hall. So like let's say the Toronto sent Hall to San Jose for Vlasic and bought him out. Well, that's what 7 times 7. So
50
you're
mil.
talking, yeah, like so. I mean, you're talking that a 50 million commitment. Who can afford to buy out somebody for 50 million and just move on like it didn't happen? Like 3 teams in the NHL.
Yeah, I don't know. That's crazy to do.
The Leafs did it with Bobrovsky, or
Oh.
Grabowski. Sorry.
I was like,
I want to
what?
say he was 5.5 over 5 or 4 years or something like that. So they were paying him. They paid him like 8 or 10 year term, but they were paying him like, well, the full cap because it was buyout, but in installments. So like that's one of the biggest ones. So I mean,
Do you
the Leafs
think
could do it. The Leafs print money. They would do it.
just okay, so would it be possible to in a buyout situation, I'm going to use Vlasic just as the example because we were on him. Leafs trade for him, buy him out 50 mil, then re-sign him for league minimum for the next 7 years.
Team that buys him out can't resign.
Okay.
So in
There you go.
this
Answered
theory
my
for San
question.
Jose, yeah. So Toronto acquires Vlasic, buys him out, goes back to San Jose. That's legal.
And then he's basically making double salary for the next seven
He could,
years.
but he could go back and be like, "All right, you're giving me these crazy contracts. Just sign me back to an entry level contract, and overall, like, I'm
It
getting
really
paid
helps the team.
appropriately.
Yeah.
But now, let me paint a picture. Doug Wilson is on thin ice in San Jose, right? And
Yeah.
with all the contracts he's given out, he's in a bit of a tight spot with Carlson and Burns and whatever. Can you really have Carlson, Burns, and Vlasic locked in for 6, 7 more years
I
with
don't
them
know why
aging?
you would want all your money tied up in defensemen. That doesn't seem
You
very smart
can't,
to me.
right? And no one's going to trade for them. So to me, that's your clear solution. If I'm Wilson, I'm trying to save my job. I trade Vlasic to Toronto, let's say, for Hall. I don't care who I'm getting back on D, but I get rid of that problem. It's going to cost me like, a second rounder of my best prospect, but it saves your job.
Maybe.
It creates some
Yeah.
flexibility, and it might save San Jose's window, because you do that, you turn around and you spend now 4 million, 3, 4, 5, 4.5 million on a goaltender to go with Jones.
Markstrom.
Perfect example. Markstrom would cost more than that.
Yeah,
but let's
he
say
would,
Markstrom cost for the same contract, $7 million for that Vlasic got bought out for, right? Well, I guess you'd have to subtract Hall. So Hall's 2 million. So let's say 5 million. Could you get Markstrom for 5 mil? Probably not.
But it's just like, yeah, you can make other things. Yeah.
But yeah, let's say they buy out Vlasic and he comes back or doesn't, but they get a goalie. Are they better? Probably. San Jose is probably better, right?
Probably, yeah.
So I mean, that's for them. Is it worth trading your, let's say, a second or even the second and a third in your top prospect to almost press the reset button and reopen your window?
It feels like with this scenario, you could come up with any way that any team out there could get better. But with anything in game theory, there's going to be a winner and a loser. So that's would be the most interesting part of this whole thing is.
But what I'm looking at is in situations where they can both be considered winners. So like in San Jose, if San Jose doesn't do that, they're locked in right now and they're screwed, right? Everyone says they're screwed right now, which they are with those contracts and even what's his name? Jones locked in on a big contract. Like maybe Jones is an example. Maybe if there's 2 buyouts, you buy out Jones and you do this trade with Vlasic, bam, you've completely reset everything. San Jose solved. Yeah, you've lost a couple premier assets, but maybe you can lure a free agent or 2. Maybe you can go and sign Galchenyuk on a 1-year prove-me deal, or maybe you can get Thornton and Marleau to come back for 1 more year, or you know what I mean? Like it creates opportunities and stuff where they can actually then give themselves a win, even if the trade itself isn't necessarily a clean win.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But I got a couple more examples. The last 2 ones I'll save are crazy ones. But I got one for Calgary. I was going to bring up Buffalo and Winnipeg, but obviously there's a lot of things on that one, front, depending on what happens. So I'm not going to get into that one. And one other one that I wanted to bring up that I wasn't going to get into too much detail was Minnesota with Suter, because he's got one of those illegal contracts.
Yep.
He signed for 5 more years at 7.5.
So does that mean we're gonna slowly work our way down to Shea Weber?
No, actually, I didn't include Weber because I figured Chicago would handle themselves when it came to that. They have the money. I think they'd handle themselves.
You mean the Habs? Okay, yeah. You said Chicago.
And then what's that?
You said Chicago, and I was like,
Seabrook's on Chicago.
I said Weber.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. We'll get to Weber. I got something on Weber, but we'll get there.
See, I knew it was coming. As soon as you dropped that illegal contract word, I knew where we were going.
Yep.
I've been tuned into this podcast long enough.
Exactly. So the Ryan Suter one's also an illegal contract. So if he retires, same cap still hits it. So he's probably got 2 or 3 more years. I think he's 38 right now. So can you really carry 7.5 for 5 more years? Probably not, right? So let's say Toronto, Minnesota. I'm just using Toronto obviously as the base example, but you can apply this to any team. If
any of your favorite teams out there.
Exactly. Do it to your own team. You can do your own project like that. But
we'll come out with a worksheet for you to.
Let's say Toronto buys out Suter. Now Suter goes back to Minnesota on entry-level contract, and he rides out his career in Minnesota. There's no harm, no loss for him. Nobody's going to be complaining in the PA for that, right?
No, I don't think so.
So, I mean, where's the loser when it comes to that? Suter,
the owner.
At least would get an asset. Well, yeah. At least would get an asset. Suter could go back and, I just figured that could be something that was interesting. And the reason why I didn't bring up Parise, was because there's the rumors of the Parise Lad trade. And from what I've heard from a couple people that I know, Parise is looking to get back to the New York area.
Well, he might think twice after the coronavirus is over, but
Yeah, but I
ooh,
from
that might have been an ill-timed joke.
I
But
don't know what it is, but there's something. Apparently, there's something in his family that's I don't know if it's his significant other, or if it's his other family stuff, parents or kids or something. But he basically is kind of done in Minnesota. He went and signed there because he thought that that was where everything was going to finish off. But it sounds like things have kind of moved on him,
yeah,
and he is kind of wanting to get to New York or closer to
yeah,
New York because
the
it's a
team
lot.
never really got to where it was projected to get to, right?
But my point on that was I just didn't put Parise in here because I figured that that was something else that was going to
Yeah.
fall under some other discussion.
Okay.
So I used Suter for that example. But I'll go to Calgary next. Milan Lucic, 5.225 over 3 more years. They can't even get a new stadium deal. They're not going to be buying him out. That's my take. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but that's my take. So let's
Wait, who did
say
you say?
Milan Lucic, Calgary.
Yeah, I figured they would.
I figured they could, but if they can't get a new stadium and stuff like that, like I would think that getting a new stadium is more important than them buying out Lucic, right? But if they can get Lucic bought out and it's not on their
Yeah,
hands,
I kind of
could be
operate on
valuable.
the opinion that any team can buy out anyone, but I guess that's probably something you shouldn't think about because
But if somebody, a low market team, is trying to buy somebody out and they kill $5 million, that's $5 million they can't spend the next year because they've blown it. Plus, they now probably have to get rid of more money somewhere else as well, right? So you got to keep that in mind.
it's the accountant side of
But
you.
what's that?
It's the accountant's job, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I don't know if let's just use the example of Janssen for Lucic. Calgary doesn't have to spend the money or anything like that. They get a suitable replacement in Janssen on the second or third line, and Toronto deals with the buyout. That's probably a bundle, probably not top picks, but maybe a second, a third, and a prospect,
Yeah.
something like that. So I mean, obviously, these are just ways to illustrate how the Leafs can not only clear cap, but also get more assets that they can turn around and use, like to build their depth, or can flip to other franchises for other better picks or prospects that better suit what they need. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And then Ottawa, I use the example for both Bobby Ryan and Zaitsev. Ryan has got 7.25 over 2 more years, and Zaitsev's got 4.5 over 4 more years. So they might both fit into a situation like that.
Yeah.
Ottawa, obviously, I don't.
Not gonna do shit about.
No, he's not, right? So I mean, Dorian might be told, "Hey, I'd rather give up a bunch of picks and not pay the money." Which, if that's the case, Toronto's the perfect match for being like, "Cool, give us the picks and prospects. We'll spend the money. We don't care."
Especially since Ottawa's kind of like been loading up on picks, and they're gonna have a sick first round this year.
I'm going to say something crazy here. You want another crazy take? I think the Ottawa Senators will end up in Quebec and become the new Quebec Nordiques within 3 years.
That's the take of the podcast, eh?
That's my take.
That's the hot take.
Yeah, I believe that.
Within
I believe that to
3
be true.
years.
Within
All right.
3 years. That's my belief. The only way that does not happen is if the Ottawa Senators end up lucking into this draft, get Lafreniere and another top pick, and all these other young guys come together and they become those Ottawa Senators it was of like 10 years ago.
Okay.
That's the only way to save it. If not, it's on a crash course to needing to get the fuck out of Ottawa. And there will never be expansion to Quebec ever, ever, ever. But relocation is possible. Remember how much everyone, I don't know if you're paying attention as NHL as much, but at the time that Atlanta moved to Winnipeg, that seemingly came out of absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, it was very fast.
Yeah. My point to that is that there's always a backup plan. And the Senators' backup plan, I have no firsthand knowledge of this, but my true belief is that their backup plan is Quebec. So if Ottawa fails in Ottawa, they're going to Quebec. I'm convinced of that. So
Quebec City, right? Right where the Nordiques used to go.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, with the Senators, I don't know. I mean, maybe the Leafs could get Connor Brown and another piece or two back. And with Ottawa having all these elite picks and prospects, it's kind of like what we referred to with Vancouver, where they have like they might fall out of love with their guys a couple down the list, which means somebody could maybe take advantage of that. And with them loading up with all these picks and prospects over the last couple of years, they have a lot of them too. So like it could be interesting in a deal like that where the Leafs could say, give us 3 prime assets. We'll buy out both Ryan and Zaitsev.
Okay.
And we'll give you Kerfoot and Hall, let's say. So the Leafs don't really lose anything that's going to hurt them, but they also then gain all this other stuff and a bunch of cap room. So it's a solution. But what I was most excited to was to get to the next 2. And one would be what you referred to your question before as Weber. So let's go to let's do
what. So I'm just curious, when you say Weber, why do you not have the same take on Weber that you did Seabrook, and that Montreal would just handle it themselves?
Because I have another different take, another different angle that I'd come at on that.
There's more to it, is what you're saying. Okay.
There is, yeah. So I'll use the last example as Florida because it fits the same mold as everything else I've been mentioning here. Now, I'm going to say this is absolutely fucking crazy. This is insanity crazy. Very, very unlikely, but I still want to put it out there just to entertain one's mind. Florida signed Bobrovsky last year.
Yeah, the best signing of the offseason.
And the management has been it seems to be common knowledge that they basically went to him and said, "Oh, great! Basically, this is his exact cap. You now no longer have that money because you fucked up." Basically, is the way that.
Okay, I knew I brought that out of somewhere when I brought it up earlier in this podcast. That's what you were. Okay.
Yeah. So like that seems to be common knowledge. Everyone seems to be talking about it. So I guess it's just assumed. So if that's the case, and Talon is probably on thin ice because of it, everyone thought Florida was going to be amazing for the last couple of years, and they just haven't taken that step, right? So if he's going to save his job and he wants to make a big move, and he wants to regain the trust, and to be the best ever GM, like he's considered to be one of the better GMs in modern history, anyways, right?
Yeah.
If you could in history say, I was the guy who moved a $60 million contract, wouldn't that make you the man? If you could say, I moved Bobrovsky.
Why not just buy him out? I guess they won't let him, right? Yeah.
Wouldn't that make you the man?
Or, yeah, it would, but it also looks like, you are doubling back on the position you took.
But you're also admitting that wipe the slate clean, start fresh. Just wipe clean.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I think people are too afraid to admit when they make mistakes in general, let alone GMs. How can they ever admit
or
mistakes?
$60 million mistakes?
Yeah, with $60 million mistakes of other people's money.
But if it's not you that has to pay that money, but you can fix that problem, isn't that a win?
I think so.
So let's say Florida moved Bobrovsky to Toronto.
But
and Toronto actually spent $60 million and bought him out.
Or I guess they can't keep him for cap.
They wouldn't keep. How much is that worth?
Too much. Wouldn't happen.
Right? So the reason why I didn't want to just not bring it up, because like if anyone actually like looked at this practice, I feel like that would be the most exciting one to do. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to leave it out.
I wanna look at this a different way a little bit. Is it possible that he'd be trigger shy to do that kind of move? Say there's people willing to do that kind of move.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine trading him. He gets bought out. He goes signs, and then he's that $10 million goalie somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you look like? Because it's a goaltender that had one bad year. So like. It is possible that he gets back to his form, is it not?
He is, but I mean, are you going to commit to that $60 million? And basically, my question is to you: is if you have an option right now?
Yeah, it's your one chance to get out of it. Yeah,
here's your one chance, or you can sit in it for 7 more years if you're wrong.
Well, he won't be there for 7 more years if he's wrong.
He won't. But I'm now talking at an ownership level. Yeah. If I'm above the GM and I'm saying, regardless of the fact that they signed this contract, you right now have an option in front of you to rid yourself of it or pass on that and maybe get really fucking burned. You're going to at least weigh the options, right?
Yeah.
You'd be stupid not to. So then that led me to the natural, what could you possibly fucking get for that? Like in picks and prospects. That's insane. Like whatever. What about this? The Leafs they trade Bobrovsky and Ekblad to the Leafs for Kerfoot. Toronto buys out Bobrovsky. They get Ekblad for spending $60 million. There's your defense solution.
Is it a solution? What's his contract like? Did you have that? I just didn't think there'd be enough room in Toronto land to fit Ekblad. I figured he had someone.
He's got 7.5 for 5 more years.
Yeah.
But you got to remember, if you're moving Kerfoot, there's $3 million. So you're really only adding $4 million. So that means you need to get rid of $4 million somewhere else. Okay, well, Janssen, bye. I go sign this Russian kid they're talking about, and I go maybe get Thornton on an entry level, or I retain Spezza on an entry level or on a basic contract, and there's my solution.
Mr. Maverick's favorite game, speculation of crazy trades.
I'm making so many assumptions and everything, obviously,
and
a lot of this is just for the fun of it.
We don't have anything else to talk about right now, so might as well talk about hypotheticals.
In this crazy ass situation, that's not off of value to trade Bobrovsky and Ekblad, and they could even trade them Hall, Kerfoot, and Gauthier, let's say. So you get 3 useful players, and you rid yourself of an error, but you also lose what you thought was your franchise defenseman. Now, let's be real. There's a lot of talk. Remember we brought up last podcast about Florida potentially doing something major because it's just not been working. You're not trading Barkov, so who is your next piece? Well, Yandel's getting older, so he's not your next piece. Then you got Strawman and Matheson on the back end. They're not really the greatest.
Yeah, and you're probably not trading Huberdeau either.
Probably not moving Huberdeau. Hoffman's a free agent, so now your next piece is Dadonov, Connolly. So, you're not talking elite pieces, right? So the piece you're moving, if you're looking to make a shakeup, is Ekblad. So if we're assuming that Florida's considering moving Ekblad in that situation, and then you relate it here, why wouldn't that be a win?
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm a bit biased. I'd love for Toronto to do that. But in Florida's shoes, you're not getting destroyed. It's not unfair. Yeah, you're losing a stud, but you're getting rid of the biggest problem that could cripple you as a franchise moving forward. Depending how you feel. There's different people that would think Bobrovsky is coming back or will be worth the money. Who knows? I don't even myself know if I would believe in it.
Yeah.
But if I'm a betting man, I would strongly consider taking the bullet of losing Ekblad. And man, they fucked up on Markstrom. They quit on Markstrom. What if they did this and then went out and signed a goalie for, a proper deal, 6 over 5?
It's possible.
Difference between Markstrom and Bobrovsky? Marginal, right?
Markstrom's used to playing on teams that let him get a million shots against him too.
Exactly. So it's just I don't think it's crazy as pie in the sky when you really break it down, but it would be pie in the sky to see a $60 million contract be bought out in the first year of its existence. Just to not say that would be insanity. But the last one I wanted to bring up was the Weber one. And why I wanted to bring it up as the last one is because it's similar to this whole setup, but I wanted to take a slightly different angle at it. Let me ask you, you're the Nashville Predators. I've brought it up before. Weber's going to retire in a couple years, and his cap's going to come back at you and kill you in a couple years, and you're sitting here just waiting for it.
Trade for it, buy it out? Is that what you're saying?
Thank you.
It's like someone owns the poison, the only thing on the world that can sink your ship, and you all right, I'll buy it off you.
Yep. So then you can have the peace that it's not an issue, right? Isn't that smart?
It is.
Isn't that pretty fucking smart? If you're Nashville, because you're kind of screwed if you're Nashville because you've got Johansson, you've got Turris, and you've got who's the other center they've got? Duchesne. Yeah. So they've got those 3 guys locked in. Johansson is 8 over 5, Turris is 6 over 4, and Duchesne is 8 over 8.
Wow.
That's a problem. A big problem, especially knowing Weber's coming back soon too. Weber will be coming back before any of those. Well, maybe not Turris, but the Johansson and the Duchesne. Weber will be coming back onto the cap before those guys are off the cap.
Yeah,
That's going to be
it's also going to
crippling.
be interesting. Like, who knows how this virus thing is going to impact? We know going to impact players and their plans to retire. Like, we know that Rask has come out and said that
Hmm.
he's contemplating retirement now early because he wants to spend time with kids and this whole thing. Like, this whole thing's like we touched about this at the top of the podcast. It's putting things in perspective for people across the globe.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
like it's very possible that there are going to be a number of players that come back from this and realize there's more to life than hockey that they've been
Hmm.
dedicating their entire life for.
What's the difference of 50 or 65 million? I've already got 50. Do I
Yeah,
really
like
need 60?
exactly. They're
Yeah.
going to pull like the Tim Thomas kind of thing and just be like,
Well, it's also different in hockey because in baseball and these other sports, you can get 20, $30 million per season. So, like playing an extra 2 or 3 years, you can make an extra 100 mil. So, like, that might be worth it. We're
yep,
playing an extra 3 years in hockey, especially at the end of your career, is an extra what? 3 mil, maybe?
can
Five
be
mil?
a
Is that really worth it? Probably not. Probably stay at home with your
definitely now
kids
that
and
they're
enjoy them.
getting the perspective of what they're missing out on and
Exactly. Yeah. And
before
like, yeah.
they just loved going. They probably loved going to all these different cities, seeing all their
Hmm.
girlfriends.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so happy that you jumped the gun on that Nashville thing and getting Weber. That was the whole point of this to see if you would jump that gun. I'm glad you did.
Well, to be honest, a lot of it has to do with now that we're on episode 15. I've been listening to you talk and your crazy theories for over 15 hours worth of content. So
That's
I've
true.
kind of started to pick up a little bit of the thought patterns. It
There we
might be my
go.
inner poker player, but I
There
pick
we
up on
go.
some tendencies that you have
Yeah. So
and
I
things
mean,
like that. So
I would do that, and to relate that back to the PA thing that you brought up a couple times as well. What if part of the deal was, okay, I'm Nashville, Montreal, we're going to give you an asset for cooperating with us. Send us back Weber. Either we'll buy him out or we'll flip him to Team X who will buy him out. And then part of the agreement is that Weber goes back to Montreal so that Montreal doesn't lose their captain. But they then can
that seems like the
renegotiate a
hardest
new
part. Yeah.
contract so that it's just kind of like an assumed that it's more of a paper transaction. So there's nothing being affected for any of the players.
How do you sell that to
Montreal,
Weber though? Like I don't see like
you're making more money
making more money, get more cap space for better players to
for better
play
players.
with.
Your
Yeah,
fans aren't going to turn on you when all of a sudden you're 41 and you're being paid 8 million and you're more of like a $2 million player. You sign him on a 5 year deal at 2 mil. That's one of the best contracts in the league, right?
yeah,
Yes, he's being paid more money, but that doesn't matter when we're looking at cap only, right?
right.
So I mean, if that goes around in that circle, he leaves, goes, comes back to Montreal. He's still the captain, he's still the player, and he's being paid more money, but the cap is way less. It's a win-win for Montreal. It's a win for Nashville because Nashville gets away from that poison, and for Montreal for allowing Nashville to do that. Here's a second and a prospect for cooperating with us, and you also get the savings on the cap of 8 million down to 2 million. So you save 6 million on cap over X amount of years, plus you get a pick and a prospect for free.
Yeah,
That's how you make yourself
it's gonna
like
be
a
some
legendary
crazy deals.
GM.
There'll be some insane crazy deals. And in the worst, do you think like with all these buyout deals going on, people might potentially forget about what happens a year later with the expansion draft? Or we don't
Yes,
even know if that's still like is that
it
still has anyone
it's
said anything about that if that's still on path to
well,
be
nothing's guaranteed, right?
yeah
So it could be delayed theoretically, but at the same time, the NHL probably wants them in to try and stimulate their own
true
revenues.
and
So
it
it probably
usually
won't be
adds some
affected.
eyes to the league when new
New fans and
teams
stuff like that.
yeah
Yeah, yeah. So I would be unsure if they would push it, but maybe logistically they would have no choice. But
potentially if it was this season they might not they might have to
mhm,
push it a year but they still have a
mhm,
whole nother season I guess there's still months and months of stuff to happen for us to figure out
mhm.
what's going on with that but yeah
Yeah, I mean that's the game I was all excited for because
buyouts and more buyouts I
it's
love it
it's gonna get crazy because even the buyouts too, teams looking ahead for for the expansion. Like, there's going to be some guys who say, you know what, my buyouts now this year, yeah, it sucks that I'm going to lose one season of them, but it's going to set me up for a better situation and I get to pick a prospect out of it. I'd rather gamble taking the picks and prospects and trying to find a replacement player somewhere for that guy than sit and wait and then end up being caught with my pants down when
totally
I can't do anything, you know?
Yeah.
So
cool.
The people who make the moves now are going to be the big winners, and I think the NHL was finally starting to settle into a rut, not a rut, but like settle into like its pattern. And I think that because of this, I already was saying that because of expansion, it's going to blow that up. But because of this happening and then expansion, honestly, all bets are off, man. All bets are off. I would say if I had to go around on every roster and say this guy is not tradable, will not be traded, and will not move teams in no capacity, he's on this team for the next 3 or 4 years, I bet you I could probably only come up with 30 to 50 names tops across the entire NHL, which is one or two names per team.
I hope they do it. Like we said during this, we're not even sure. Like, this potentially could not ever happen.
Mm-hmm.
The buyout thing might just be a pipe dream for all these teams that are in kind of cap situation problems. However, with the way the cap goes up, I think it's inevitable that there might be an issue next season if they don't do a buyout, right? I think that's what sparked the whole conversation about why buyouts make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I personally would like to see it just because I like seeing more, almost as much as watching the games themselves. I like watching the general managers wheeling and dealing, making moves, and pushing the small edges, kind of like the Moneyball thing. I love that part. Sure. I love that part about sports. So it'd be cool.
I love trading when somebody trades 2 7s for a 6th. I love talking about that and breaking that down and who wins and why and whatever. And most people be like, dude, it's a 7th and a 6th. Like, who the fuck cares? Like, that person will probably never even play for the Marlies. So why do you care? I don't know. It's
just
cool. Something.
Yeah.
Anyways,
that pretty much.
I think
that pretty much wraps it up for us, I guess.
I think that was a good podcast for all things considered. I mean, got a little energy in it, but
considering everything going on and not
exactly
too much to talk about, I think something we might want to maybe potentially look at next week, unless some crazy news happens to focus on, maybe apart from buyouts, we can maybe look at some of the teams who is coming up for free agents at the end of the season, and who knows, maybe that'll be something we can talk about next week. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have some sort of other break that we can talk about next week, and we'll continue research. And
we're gonna restart the fantasy pod next week. You said draft is this Sunday, so we'll be talking about the drafts, who are the biggest winners and losers of the draft. Basically, the only winner is going to be who gets number 1, but as long as I don't get number 10, I just do not want number 10.
Yeah, I know. All right, man.
All right, you take care.
Yeah, take it easy, man. Stay safe.
You as well. Bye-bye.